Hello, friends of the internet, and welcome to the latest in our MarTech webinar series, where MarTech meets Composable DXP, how to build your enterprise stack. And I'm very happy today to be joined by Douglas Karr, the founder of MarTech Zone. My name is Varty. I'm president here at Agility CMS, and let's jump into the content. Welcome, Douglas, to our series.
Great to be here. Thank you, sir.
All right, we're just gonna dive right into the content. And the first question seems to be the most obvious. We use lots of acronyms in our industry. So what is DXP? Douglas, kind of explain that for us.
Well, a digital experience platform, the way that I like to say it is that, people take these walks kind of linear through a trail, but our websites are basically these XY coordinates, right? And so we don't actually proceed people through. We show them all this navigation and we expect them to kind of follow their way through. And so DXPs offer an incredible opportunity to personalize the experience and tailor it to the user. So that you can increase that engagement, increase that conversion rate, and really give them the information that they need when they're looking for it.
So yeah, it's representing the full customer journey as part of that, and certainly I think the technologies involved with DXP have really evolved, over especially the last kind of couple of years, right? We've seen major shifts in what people are doing to create DXP.
Oh yeah, we have now. I mean, with AI, it used to be that you had all these if or statements, else statements, and if they were tagged this, then display that or whatever. But now AI is really starting to roll where it's doing automated testing and then showing them the next screen based on probability that they're going to engage.
Right, and we're really looking towards the idea of a digital experience platform. One of the leaders in the industry is Gartner, who kind of tells us where the industry is at and where it's going. This is an interesting quote. This is from a publication they put out late in 2019. Application leaders struggle with cumbersome and time-consuming integrations and rollout of monolithic DXP. So we see the idea of monolithic DXP and the problems associated with that. Douglas, what do you think about the sort of the shift in the industry we've seen, where there's like these big suite platforms that have everything all built in, down to I think what we're starting to see as like the idea of a smaller and more nimble or agile systems?
Well, it's been painful. I think Gartner also has put out some great data that I think it's about 60% of digital transformation projects fail. And a reason for that is the monolithic DXPs. It's basically that you do this, you start implementing a solution that you believe is the perfect thing for your company to drive marketing and sales, and then along the way you start hitting all of these roadblocks of it's people issues and training issues, it's process issues, it's data integrity issues. And so that's why these massive projects are always over budget and over time, and really hard to set expectations on getting a return on that marketing investment.
Right. So I think maybe that's a good thing to look at as our goal for DXP, is we want them to be, on time, on budget if possible, but also we can actually set the expectations for what we think that will be. And I think, we're going to talk about some of these solutions later on. So we're kind of getting towards the idea here that a digital experience platform can be composed of SaaS services. This is kind of, in contradiction to that idea of a monolithic DXP. Douglas, how can we compose a DXP from SaaS services?
Yeah, I think a perfect example that I like to give to people is we do marketing cloud implementations, and we love the product, but there's a full administrative kind of feel to it. There's a data feel to it, and then there's a programming feel to it. And these things can take months. Whereas, let's say off the shelf, solution like there's a few of them, Klaviyo and Mooseend and Omnisend. What they've done is they've basically built a middle data tier that is interchangeable with an e-commerce system. And so
Right.
You plug them in and you're plugged in. There's no configuring and adapting and adjusting and tailoring. And so that composable aspect is really something that I think is just going to skyrocket in growth. And I think, Gartner, I think even said, by 2023, 60% of businesses are going to have, some composable, DXP implementation.
So really what we're talking about here is we want to be able to manage our customer journey from, end to end completely using the idea of a DXP by composing it of these sort of probably smaller SaaS services that are, I say API based, but really what that means is they can kind of plug into each other seamlessly. And you've seen that in the industry where that's worked out well for your customers. And is this something that you advise people to do, Douglas, on a regular basis?
Absolutely. Yeah. And they call them, the new term for it is packaged business capabilities, a PBC.
Okay.
And
Right.
so they're finite. They're not a massive, it's not, oh, I'm going to put a CRM in. It's that you're going to put one aspect of a CRM, one aspect of a feature. And so you
Right.
might have a composable DXP that's made up of 1,000, different processes and integrations, but you never had to touch the integration. It was just plug and play.
Right. Interesting. And so, some companies, as you talked about digital transformation too, they might be looking to bring on or to fix or complete a part of the customer journey or to revamp it. They may have tools already in place that are doing a good job at certain parts. But what you're saying is they might not need a tool to do everything, just a tool to kind of fix maybe one part of the customer journey or one part of their data reporting. That's really interesting. And I think the idea of being agile as a company isn't necessarily something we think of at the beginning, but it could be.
Well, we tend to migrate off of platforms when we're frustrated and when we
Mhm.
reach those stopping points, and then we migrate to a new system, and then we a year later we realize those stopping points.
Right.
So it's a difficult it's a difficult industry to be in.
Yeah. Now, do you think we reach these stopping points when we find the limits of products based on as companies are growing? We kind of outgrow them, or do they get kind of outlived as we just kind of use them more and find out that, oh, maybe that's not the way I wanted it to work?
Well, I think every software as a service company has to, have a feature set that is in the future for its growth. Well, that sometimes doesn't match where you're at. So where we saw it, I was in the early days of Exact Target, which was Marketing Cloud now, and we outgrew customers. They
Right.
had to leave, and so
Yeah.
you saw people like Mailchimp, take off and do really well in that industry. And so that's part of the that's part of the issue here is that if you have this monolithic platform, your day is spent, working on the features and functionality that are going to sell, that are going to
Mhm.
get utilized the most, that are going to be the most sticky for customers to stay
Right.
on board. But
Yeah.
those aren't necessarily in the best interest of the company that's purchasing it.
Right. Yeah, so let's just kind of dig into this a little further, and in terms of how can we do this? How can we make DXP composable? And in terms of like framing this for the customers that are listening, what's your advice there, Douglas?
Well, we always go back to a discovery phase, and that's people, processes, and then the platforms. I think one of the big mistakes that we see in digital transformation is people tend to do it in reverse. They think new platform shows up, that's the silver bullet, let's implement it, and then they have to work backwards from there. And so
Right.
what we found really works well is kind of a top-down interview. So you find out from leadership in the organization what the ultimate goals of the organization are, all the way down to the customer service rep and talking about what their process is on a daily basis, and or an analyst on how they're fixing and what kind of systems they're doing, what kind of problems that they're running into. And when you can map all of those processes out, and so you get all the entry points of data, you get all the exit points of data, you get all the data problems, now you can start looking for the system. Now you can start
Right.
looking for the platform that is going to achieve. And we tend to focus, because we're sales and marketing focused, we tend to focus on internal automation,
Right.
what's going to make our lives easier internally, and then of course externally, what's going to make the customer experience better. But
Right.
we have to have the right team in place, and then we have to have those processes. We have to be able to feed those processes, because if you have to flip everybody's processes, or you have the wrong team in place, it doesn't matter how beautiful the system is that you bring in, it's probably not going to succeed.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You're almost coming at it from the opposite end of the spectrum. When it's interesting when folks come to Agility, often they'll say, "Hey, we need a new website. Ergo, we need a new CMS, and we want it to do all of these things." Often, which sound like a monolithic DXP that they need. I need it to do, e-commerce and, map my customer journey and all these other aspects that as a headless CMS provider, we simply don't do anymore. And with this sort of these requirements and expectations, customers will often say, and here's my new design that I have a developer all set to build. When can we start building it?
Right.
As if, and I think that might be a conversation that, as you say, you kind of try to flip it on its head. Well, let's go back to the people and the processes that are going to be part of this. And we often ask, what are the tools that you already have that do a lot of your customer journey mapping? A lot of people already have CRM and things like maybe they have a Salesforce or a MailChimp or a HubSpot already in place. Maybe they can keep using those and they haven't necessarily outgrown it yet. So it's really interesting to think about the different aspects of your business and how you're going to transform it to where you want to go.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
I think what's that process. One of the things that the sort of idea is, what are the best of breed services that are out there? And you sort of mentioned a couple already, Douglas. How can you choose the best of breed services to provide the most value to your business? I know one of the things that I like to think about is, hey, what is your business already using that you like as tools? We should try to keep those. And maybe the ones that you don't like or that you've outgrown or have outgrown you should flip. What's your experience with this in terms of when you come into most customer, most of your customers' organizations? What do they have in place and how do they choose best of breed services?
Yeah, again, it goes back to best of breed is one of those. There's two sides to that coin, right? There's the top right quadrant that everybody publishes that says that these are the best platforms out there. But then there's the needs of the organization as well. And that's where we try to marry the two. Obviously, we want to find a company that is innovating and evolving. And we see that they have outstanding customer support capabilities, documentation, and all that stuff. But ultimately, we want to match those processes that we're trying to achieve, those goals that we want to achieve with that great business, because then we know the two together we have there's going to be some flexibility there. The south side of that, or the problematic side of that, is finding an off the shelf solution that only does one thing, and then you're stuck with it. And as your business evolves and your processes grow, now you've got that pain point of you've got to migrate and you've got to move and everything. And so if you get something like a disposable DXP, now it's not about migrating to a new system. It's adding on that feature and functionality, which is a totally different conversation.
Right. Yeah. And at that point, what we consider best of breed goes back to something you were saying earlier with kind of like the seamless interoperability or connectivity between those services, the kind of services that I can just plug in to my existing structure to add on that feature and functionality or to bring that new benefit to my company. Obviously, that's going to be one that I want to choose over all others. Is that something that we can kind of start grading these services by in terms of how interoperable or how easy it is to integrate them?
There's actually some tool sets out there right now where people are collecting this data, and you could go in and basically document your MarTech stack, or the tools that you're utilizing, and then it compares you to other organizations and shows you, oh, they're actually utilizing this as a social media marketing platform, or they're using this for accounting systems, and so you can see what the more popular directions are that people are taking. And so I mean, we tend to, again, we want to do that audit, we want to do that data audit and identify all the systems and ins and outs of it, and then we rarely pick the top right quadrant. Most of the time we're picking the solution that has seamless integration with 3 of the products already in place, because we know that it's going to shorten the cycle, it's going to increase use, it's going to improve automation and data accuracy, it's going to reduce frustration on the staff, it's going to and so that's what we're always, it's pairing that up properly.
Right. Yeah. There's a interesting way that I've started talking about this, and we used to talk about a modern kind of stacks, as opposed to, and I think the idea of like even the idea of stack or composability is the idea of multiple services that make something up. When we talk about MarTech, we've been talking about DXP so far, but now to bring in the terminology of MarTech, how would you describe what's a modern MarTech stack?
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because I almost feel like what I was saying was MarTech, now you're tacking on sales to it. Your asset management is sat, document management and contract negotiation, auto flows, accounting systems for, getting that information back.
Right.
So it's almost like, the MarTech stack nowadays is one of those pieces of the overall system too. But we tend to again say, where are the sources of data that we need, and then how are we communicating with people? Pretty much that sums up our MarTech stack. So if we have if it's a B2B organization, it might be we might have a data element to it where we're capturing B2B data and being able to bring that into a CRM where we can score and prioritize who those leads are, and then marketing automation system that's communicating and creating journeys back to a website that has a digital experience that can pull them through. But a company like that might not have a social media aspect to it, and so they don't have to worry about that. I think that's one of the pain points that I see a lot of marketers get in, is we have to do everything everywhere, and I don't think that that's true. I think it's a company really does have to pick and choose where it's going to focus its attention.
Interesting. So you're kind of talking about, hey, where can we meet our customers in terms of digital experiences? Well, maybe it's social media, but almost always it's a website of some kind. Maybe it's apps, and then talking about those places as the digital properties that we can maintain in terms of content and experience. But then you talked about data flow and how do we capture data and how do we track it along the customer journey, and and how we do that as an organization. Is that going to kind of dictate the kind of things you should choose to be part of your stack?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately your business should decide, right?
Right.
It's again where I put those three back together, people, processes, and platforms. I'll give you a crazy one. We worked with a major donation company, nonprofit online, and their entire staff was certified on a certain platform. So guess what happened when they migrated to a new platform? They lost their staff.
Yeah, no one was too happy about that.
Yeah, and so we warned them ahead of time that, hey, this is one of the risks associated with it. But a company doesn't normally think that. They don't think, hey, there's a chance that we might lose some people, in this migration because people are comfortable with the platform that they're in and everything else. And so it's one of those things that if you can analyze, if you have a culture of innovation internally, it's amazing. Right. I'm sure, Agility CMS is a perfect example. When you're working in a software as a service company, you can't have anything but an innovative culture internal.
Right.
And so but some organizations don't have that. They have a risk averse, or tighten down the hatches, or, maybe it's a IT strong, organization that's, that really keeps things, firm in their grip, versus an innovative company that is testing and trying and stuff. So it's a real struggle within an organization.
Yeah, you mentioned digital transformation. In my mind, digital transformations for a lot of companies is going from that, we're going to do what's tried and true and what we're comfortable with, and kind of moving into, well, how can we move from that into a culture of innovation, and what does that look like? That's, in my experience, what's what it's been like a lot of times.
You're right. Well, it's the demands of your consumer or customer, right?
Right.
They expect a different experience.
Yes. Now, I'm just going to visualize a couple of ways that I've been helping customers look at the concept of DXP. And we started with this kind of honeycomb thing where, and since we're Headless CMS, I tend to put CMS in the middle of this, although that's, a CMS-centric worldview. Definitely marketing automation is one of the things that we've seen as a tool that people, tend to have as part of their DXP stack. CRM's another one. Any way to capture forms. We talked about, the digital experiences. We want to be able to capture data and bring it in. E-commerce is a huge one. There's like, what site doesn't have Shopify or BigCommerce or some sort of aspect of selling on there? Analytics, being able to drive and make decisions based on data, and then some kind of search. Now, these are I just picked kind of the 6 big ones. From your point of view, Douglas, what would you say is missing from this list of sort of other pieces of a DXP stack?
Sure. I mean, let's say asset management might be something.
Right.
So they might have a digital asset management system that
Yes.
automatically it maintains all their video and photos and everything, and has processes set up for quality control and copywriting and everything. So another one might be dashboarding. So you might have a Tableau or Google dashboard, set up with Data Studio.
Right. Yeah, a lot of different ways to do that. Personalization is another one that I specifically didn't put on this one because it's certainly one of those ones that has been over the years of varying levels of ways that people have implemented that for sure. So a lot of different sort of pieces you can mix and match. And what we tend to like to do is just go ahead and put some logos with those of like, hey, what is your organization using, or what could you use in terms of services? Obviously, we're going to recommend Agility CMS as a headless CMS, although there are other headless CMSs out there that we compete with every day. But, and then just a matter of picking some best of breed stuff. Douglas, let me know if I put anything on here that you kind of disagree with as being best of breed, or that you think is, for certain that's a one-off. Salesforce we talk about a lot. HubSpot's another one, although it's kind of like on the verge between marketing automation versus CRM. FormStack is one that a lot of our customers come to in terms of, hey, I want to use FormStack for data capture. Almost everybody uses Google Analytics. Does anybody not use Google Analytics anymore, Douglas?
Yeah, no, I think almost everybody does. Now Google Analytics 360 is starting to become more popular.
Right.
Just, third-party cookies are starting to go away and stuff. So we're trying to figure out other ways to capture data.
Certainly. Yeah, it always evolves. Algolia is really making big moves in search, just in terms of search within your website. And then Shopify is probably, if you talk about e-commerce, I would say that's, if it's not the leader, it's certainly an emerging leader in e-commerce. Yeah. I think that's kind of a given at this point. But you could also swap these out. There are alternatives for all of these platforms that you could be using that solve problems in either different ways, or they're already part of different sort of software ecosystems or different vendors. So we could, easily swap these out. Salesforce could be Dynamics if you're a Microsoft shop. HubSpot, you could be MailChimp if that's something you're already using. Oh, I didn't switch out the FormStack, but you could use something like Typeform for forms. Segment is another data capture platform, although it kind of usually fits into the Google and its ecosystem. Elasticsearch is one of the main competitors with Algolia. They both have different feature sets, and BigCommerce is often going head to head with Shopify. What are some other vendors, Douglas, that first of all, did I hit on the leaders, and are there ones that you think are leaders that I didn't mention in this list?
Yeah, I mean, if you were talking about BigCommerce and Shopify, there's Magento out there,
Right.
which is, massive. And then, Salesforce has Commerce Cloud, which is a headless, commerce, system. But again, if I wanted to put up a site and sell my widgets tomorrow, I might use Squarespace, right?
Right.
Whereas if I wanted to do international commerce with, taxation rules and everything else, then something like Commerce Cloud might, be a lot better, right? So it all depends what the needs of the company are. But no, you're hitting on all the big ones here.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about, because you've talked about Salesforce now within three different things. There's Salesforce that I think of, which is like the CRM that they've had forever, but then there's Marketing Cloud, and then there's Commerce Cloud. So these are kind of do these all work seamlessly together, or do people can they mix and match the pieces of Salesforce that work for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, we have full implementation teams. It's sometimes what I always tell people is it's race car. And when you buy a race car, you have to have a staff and a driver and mechanics, and you have to tweak the car to the track and everything else. You're not buying something off the showroom floor. A HubSpot, for example, would be fantastic for an organization that doesn't have a lot of processes in place, just starting its sales team up, and then they could grow to 150 salespeople, on HubSpot and do fantastic. And so that's kind of the way I weight it. Salesforce is just the big bully on the block that's stealing everybody up and trying to productize integrations and does a great job at flexibility, with those integrations. But Adobe is snapping people up. Microsoft is doing a fantastic job at, pulling people in too. So all these companies are after the same thing, right? They want to keep adding features, to their current thing to make it stickier, to keep people on board, and so the irony is, I think Agility CMS is a great example of a company that when we get to a true composable system, for this, I think it's going to be outstanding, because it's going to force those large companies to be more agile in their approach to just making a compartmentalized tool that you could just plug in for one aspect of your business. Right now, they want you to migrate everything there, buy everything, have a huge contract, which not every company can do.
Right. Well, which leads me to my next slide, where, maybe you don't need all of the different various services either right now, or, maybe they're just not part of what is in your business that you need. Maybe you don't even need e-commerce, but you do need CRM. You talked about HubSpot. You could swap out Salesforce with HubSpot on this diagram and really have a complete suite of services that are necessary for your digital properties right now to manage your customer journey. And so that, that honeycomb could be much larger or could be much smaller.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Based on what you have. And when we were talking about the idea of interoperability and integrations, these services, they're kind of connected, and the Headless CMS, in my point of view, tends to connect them a lot. But there's often interoperabilities between the services as well. For instance, your form stack forms could be sending data, through the CMS directly into Salesforce, or they could be bypassing whatever. So we want to be able to follow the data through these. Do you find that people are building bigger stacks or smaller stacks these days, Douglas, or is it just everybody's different?
We are seeing people start to merge. So they're creating these, they call them data lakes and everything else. So like a customer data platform, so they have one source of truth. All of their data is in that CDP, and then all of these are arms out there. And so like an Agility CMS might be out there, but the CDP is feeding them profile data that's then helping change the customer experience on the CMS. And so it's but that's probably the biggest change that we're seeing, is because you can get a real mess. We have a client right now that has 9 different systems that don't all speak to each other. There's no single view of truth. So so their staff has to log into one system and log into another system and log into another system, and it causes all kinds of errors and problems and communication delays and everything else. And those are the things that you want to fix. You want these single points of truth, that you can have in place, and then feed everything off like an arm.
Awesome. Douglas, I think we've covered pretty much everything that I was considering, and I think we've actually talked about most of the stuff that I wanted to talk about on this slide. But just in closing, how would for someone who's out there thinking, okay, I need to get started on whatever my new project is, or whatever it's going to take to sort of transform my business, how do they go? How do I go from zero to hero in terms of like going from where I am now to where I want to be?
Yeah, well, I mean, you just said it, right? You want to map out where you want to be, from a business aspect, and what you're incapable of doing now because of systems, or because of processes, or because of talent that you have internally. And then you have to itemize out, if we were an organization that was able to achieve X, here's what it's going to take there. And I think when companies do spend, I give you another example. We worked on an implementation for one client. We did an enterprise implementation, and it took about 6 months to do. The key to how quickly, that was quick. It usually would take a year and a half, because it was just massive systems, data migrations, everything else. The key to that was that they paid upfront for this discovery phase. That discovery phase enabled us to kind of remove all the roadblocks downstream, so that we knew, where the focus was, what the ultimate goal was. We stayed on target. We didn't sway at all. And it was good on that company to do it. A lot of companies don't do that. They start with the software license, and then try to work backwards. And that's just it's a recipe for disaster, and it's a great exercise internal for your staff. We've had companies that their CMO didn't realize the data issues that they had, that, frontline people knew. They knew that they had issues. We had one client that thought that they had 2 million active subscribers in their system. It wound up being about 1/10 of that, and it was that all the layers of insulation between the people that were doing, the actual execution and the leadership, introduced all these, translation problems and everything else that people didn't know. And so these discovery, phases are absolutely a critical aspect of a company. And when you can get your KPIs mapped to your goals, map to your customer needs, map to your talent, and processes. Now you can start to build, just like you have your honeycomb, you can start to build that honeycomb, and say, if we had these tools, we could execute on this more efficiently.
Douglas, this has been great chatting to you today. Now we do have some ways that we can connect with you. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. The company is Hybridge. We're a vendor agnostic company. We're Salesforce Marketing Cloud certified, but we tend to work on everything. So we love new challenges and new technologies to help people, mostly at that strategic level. We have deployment and management services as well, but we really love the strategic part of helping a company digitally transform. I've had my own blog, MarTech Zone, for 15 years now, I think. So check that out. It's just martech.zone. And I just try to help people learn, discover these tools and everything. And I don't badmouth anybody. I tell them, here's all the benefits. Go check it out. Go do a demo of that,
Right.
to see more. And then, of course, people can connect with me online. I always welcome everybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. I love growing my network and talking to people from every industry, especially software as a service too. So thank you for your time, Joel.
Well, it's been great chatting. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope the folks listening and watching today have learned a lot too. We went a little over time, but I think it was hopefully time well spent. So yeah, all things MarTech, certainly connect with Douglas. And to continue our MarTech series, we're going to have more of these webinars at agilitycms.com/events. You can certainly follow us on Twitter at AgilityCMS, or reach out, just get in touch, sales@agilitycms.com. This has been wonderful, and certainly hope to see you again. Take care. Thanks very much.